manaka. I kai palaua e wana I haili karea muki ki o nā manu. Holo noa e wai o lama me ka wailapo. I ho kai me wailo pa I ke kula o hanakahi. A kai kamana o a ke aloha I noho aloha I moku ola. I ola e nā kini e, I ola e nā kini e.
Kaulana mai nei o hilo ea, kaua kani le hua ea.
Kaua o muluini ea, ka ili o ka malini ea.
Kaulana mai nei o hilo ea, kaua kani le hua ea.
Kaua o muluini ea, ka ili o ka malini ea.
Nani male ho I ka ikena ea, ka nani o waia ke ea. Ka vai o lama ea, ma lama lama a vai I ea.
Nani wale ho I ka ikena ea.
Ka nani o waia ke ea.
Ka wai o wai o lama ea. Malama lama
Vai I ea.
ai ai I ona.
No I moku ola ea, he moku au I ke kai ea. E hoku nei ea, ka hune hune kai ea. Ko lana hoi moku ola ea, he moku au I ke kai ea.
E hoko pulu ili nei ea, ka hune hune kai ea.
Leana I kai nani ea, ka pua o ka lehua ea.
Aina mai ka puana ea.
No ka ua kani lehua ea. Leana I ka leilani ea, ka pua o ka lehua ea.
Aina mai ka puana ea, no ka ua kani le hua ea. No ka ua kani le hua ea.
No ka ua kani le hua ea.
Adam, I think we can let the credits run. I know that's what Kule always likes to do. Thank you. I know we're all disappointed that it's not Kule welcoming us to the meeting today. Kule is unwell, and so she regrets that she's not able to be here. I'm going to do my very best to facilitate this conversation in her place. And I think we can still hopefully have some good discussion, hear what people have been learning from your conversations with family and friends and community members. We'll just capture as much as we can. And if we find our way to alignment, that's wonderful. And if not, we will continue the process once Kule is back with us next week. So I think I definitely see some familiar names, people who've been with us in previous meetings. I see Troy, I see Marcia, I see Craig. I think Vanessa and Lori, I think you may be new to us. I'd welcome you to say hello and introduce yourselves if you're willing to do so.
Hello, I'm Lori Okami. I am a sustainability coordinator with Hawaii County Research and Development.
Welcome. So glad to have you, Lori. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Vanessa, would you like to say hello?
Hi, aloha. I attended the first meeting. I'm
Okay.
just a humble member of the community who supports your efforts and would like to keep myself informed. I made the first meeting but missed the last two. So I'm happy to be back. Thank you for welcoming me.
Thank you so much for coming back. And apologies, I didn't remember your name from the first meeting.
That's all right.
But glad you're back.
No problem.
And
Thank you.
members of the community are the whole point of this. So don't diminish the value of your being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcia, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to jump in?
Are you familiar with Nona Wilson? She may be new.
Oh, thank you. I think that you're right. I think that Nona is new. Nona, would you like to introduce yourself?
Aloha, Valina, mahalo for letting me attend. I thank Marcia very much for including me in the videos. I'm very interested in the subject matter. I'm also a humble member of the community, but I think what you're doing is so important. And so I feel privileged to be here to learn and hopefully to help in my small way. So mahalo nui.
Thank you so much for being here, Nona Wilson. It's very much appreciated. All right, I think that's everyone for today. All the new folks that we've recognized. Autumn, do you mind putting the slides back up? Now that we've said hello, I want to just share what we intend to spend the time on in this meeting. And well, actually, I should also have Andy introduce yourself. You're not new to me, but you are new to this group. Andy, would you mind saying hello?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name's Andy Rose. I'm part of the Perpetual team and was asked to join this call to help out with the Miro board that we'll use as part of the call. I'm based in New York and excited to be here with you all.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, we've called on Andy and his technical skills with Miro, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So I wanted to just recap where we're at in the design process. This is the fourth of the system design team meetings. And so far we've had an orientation meeting, we've discussed the revenue model, and we've previewed incentives. And then last week we spent a lot of time on incentives. Today we hope to spend some more time on incentives as well as technology and see, where I tend to be a little bit shy about using Hawaiian words. I think it's a beautiful language, but I'm conscious that it's not my language. So, but I do love the idea of mana'o. I think hearing people's, and I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, so I'm sorry, but hearing everyone's perspectives and hearing, what everyone has to say. So we'll continue that process today. And then as of right now, we have 2 more meetings scheduled. If these meetings turn out to not be enough time to hear from everyone and do what needs to be done, then we will extend the meetings to make sure that we can do justice to the process. So stay tuned for the any changes to the timeline. But for now, we're going to forge ahead with the additional 2 meetings and see where we get, and then we'll continue as needed. So other just sort of points of process. Autumn, if we can skip to I think I'll do a very 30-second version of how it works for some of our new guests today. So this is just a very, very high level overview of how reuse can work in the community. It sounds like some of you may have already watched the videos. So just the reminder that in a system where you have reusables, reusable foodware system, places that you go to get food and drink will have reusables available for you. So you will borrow them using a process that is yet to be determined in this design process, but we know that that's possible and happening in other places today. And then if we go to the next slide. Okay, so I just mentioned the checkout process, so you'll check it out. That can be scanning it, that can be tapping a credit card. There's different versions of that. Then you can take your food or drink anywhere you like when you're done with it. Part of what makes this system unique compared to what does exist elsewhere in the world is the idea of having a network of collection bins all over town, and ideally very conveniently located in places so that it's very easy for people to return the used or reusable items once you're done with them. And then once you've done that, your job is done, but there's a service provider yet to be chosen, obviously. First, we have to figure out what we want them to do exactly, but the service provider will collect all of the items that are used from each of the bins, and they will transport them to a washing facility. There we go. They'll get washed in a commercial dishwasher, to very high hygiene standards, and then they'll be sorted and inspected and redistributed back to the restaurants and other food service providers who are using them. So that is the general idea of how reuse can work in a system. We will continue to encourage people to bring your own when people remember and are able to do that, but the system allows for a way to borrow a cup or a food container anytime you don't have one that you're ready to use otherwise. So I think that's good to, that's what we're here to dig into. So reminder that how we think about kind of this phase of decision making in the process, and this is part one of the public process. After these 6 or maybe 7 or 8 meetings are concluded, there'll be another 2-month period of time during which we can review multiple additional versions of the plan. So we know that we will have multiple opportunities still to drive towards alignment, but in these discussions, what alignment looks like is, and you can go to the next slide when you're ready, Autumn. Alignment is a willingness to support. So it may be that many of us here have slightly different preferences for what we think things could be or should be, but at the end of the day, can there be a plan that everyone says, this plan is good enough, this plan works for me, and I'm willing to go ahead with it, even if it wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. And what we're always on the lookout for is a paramount and principled objection. So a paramount and principled objection is a concern that something is, sort of a sincerely felt concern that the decision may cause harm. And so that's what we're always looking for, is objections saying, is this the right way to do this? Is this safe to try? So that's what we'll be listening for in the discussion today. Autumn, if you want to skip ahead, I think we can skip that part, but maybe go to the next one, which is just a little bit more fine print on, and I really don't think this is necessary for this group given the experience we've had so far, but be your best self, be kind, listen, don't interrupt people, things like that. All the usual things we hope would happen in sort of civic and civil discourse. All right, so I think that's kind of all the fine print. Autumn, I think the next slide is just going to Miro. So what I'll propose that we do next, oh yes, Marcia, I see you've raised your hand.
Would you mind going back to the slide of the word alignment?
Yeah, Autumn, do you want
that shows Pu'uanahulu, for the benefit of people like Nona and maybe this is Pu'uanahulu, and I put this because for me it's a foundational reminder of why we are here. This is where when Ku'ulei so wonderfully told us the mana'o, and this is where the landfill is currently there, but that is not what we know of it. so much in a long time continuum. So we are part of this continuum of what we are doing here on this island and on the planet, but specifically how it impacts the Aina, particularly Pu'uanahula, a very sacred, honored place. So mahalo for that time to just go back to that foundational piece. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Marcia. I really appreciate you speaking to that. And yes, Ku'ule always does a wonderful job of reminding us of that as at the foundation of the meeting. So please, I invite anyone who's been with us on this journey, and especially you, Marcia, to help bring Ku'ule's voice into this conversation where I'm not able to bring it in, and of course, bring your own voices. So what I'd like to do now is introduce this new tool that we're using that I'm optimistic will be a really helpful tool for us to work together on the system design. It's called Miro. And Andy, when you're ready, if you want to share your screen with our draft Miro board. I don't know if Miro is familiar to anyone. I know we had been using Jamboard, and as we were preparing last week for this meeting this week, Ku'ule was just, unhappy with the functionality that Jamboard offers, and we determined that Miro might be a better option. So what you can see on your screen, and if this is hard to see on your screen, don't worry, we're going to be zooming in different places, and Autumn has also put the link in the chat. So if you want to just zoom in on and zoom around on your own, you're welcome to. But I'd like to orient you to what this is and how it works. So one of the things that's cool about Miro is it is just like a giant canvas. So it's not pages, it's just an infinity of space where you can divide up the space however you want and set things up in such a way that it's really easy to see. You can have a lot of different things and how they relate to each other, and then you can zoom in and out to kind of get a sense of what's going on. So just at the highest level, to orient you here, we've got on the left-hand side, we've got the sort of system design process overview, and we've got an area for general comments. And Andy, I'm going to have you in just a second do a little sort of tutorial on how to use the sticky notes, but we'll just do the orientation first. So you can see there's already some sticky notes. So everything that was in the Jamboard has been moved into Miro, as far as we know. That was the intention. So if we missed something, let us know. But we think that we have moved everything from Jamboard into Miro so that it's all here and we can work from this canvas going forward. So the design process elements are at the top here, and then we've got general comments, and then we have each of these little boards for each of the different decisions that this group is discussing. So you'll recall we talked about revenue models in our first meeting, and this reflects the different choices we considered. It has some of the different notes from what we talked about. And if you scroll down a little bit more, so we have some of the comments from community outreach. And then we have the collective decision that we did arrive at reflected on those boards there, on that, sticky notes. If we zoom back out, you can see there's a few other decisions here that are still ahead of us. So we have the reusable items and the scope of the program, which we've started to populate. Some of this is already in the pre-read material you would have seen. And there's some comments that have come up in other meetings that are relevant to this. But that we haven't just had a meeting to discuss this topic yet. So if this looks familiar, if it doesn't look familiar, don't worry, you didn't miss anything. We just haven't gotten there, but we've brought in other relevant things that came up in previous calls. The other two sections that are here next to this one are governance and surge events. Those are also future topics. So you'll see more populating here as we get ready for those conversations. And then on the right-hand side, all the way over here, we have our circuit, sort of our foodware loop that we know is kind of how the system will work. So this is exactly parallel to what we just walked through in the slides. And it looks at the checkout process and the different decisions related there, the return process and the different decisions there, the collection and transport process, what's involved there, wash and dry, and then redistribution. So redistribution and collect and transport are quite similar. There's overlap there because it's the same elements of logistics and labor, but it's still helpful, I think, to see them reflected on this. And these look like slices of bread to me. So I'm not sure why, but that's what's coming out of me right now is there's a lot of bread happening on the slide, on the page, I mean. So what Ku'ule was excited about when she saw this format is she said that for her and for many people in her community, thinking about the whole is such an important part of thinking about any one piece of the whole. And it's really hard to look at just one decision without keeping it in the context of the whole picture. So our hope is that even though not everything is filled in here yet, as we have these conversations with this group, we're able to continually sort of zoom in and look at the specific decision, but then zoom out and consider the whole and sort of be able to do that back and forth. And if there's, you know, for example, when we were talking about return incentives last week, the question came up about, well, how long someone needs something has a lot to do. It's quite dependent on where the return bins are, where can actually people get stuff back into the system. So that led us to a discussion around, you know, collection bin design and placement. So if we, you know, if we want to talk more about that today, then there's a chance to kind of zoom back and forth between those sections. We will soon have a draft map of potential placement locations for people to engage with and move pins around. We don't have that in here today. We expect to have that soon, but we can at least describe the logic for how collection bins will be placed and how broadly we think they'll be placed and how many we think that will be. So you can start to get a sense of that. So before we jump into the specific topics for today, I just want to ask for any reactions, questions, things sort of about this as a tool. And then Andy, I'll have you do a little sticky note tutorial because this is a chance for everyone to kind of go in and put their own sticky notes on here too, if that interests you. And we welcome it. We welcome that. So raise your hand or just speak up if there's anything you want to say about this. Okay, well, speak up at any point if you have a comment. Andy, do you want to just show people as an example, maybe under the technology one, where we're going to sort of zoom in first, how, if I want to add my own comment, how I do that? And yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, so what's really cool about Miro is it's basically like a virtual whiteboard. So it's as close as we can get to all being in a room and putting our own sticky notes up on the board as ideas come forward. So each of these little pads here is a sticky note. And so we've kind of added them already. And if you put your mouse over it and drag it to the side, you then can place it anywhere kind of on the board. So if you want to add a comment, you just double click into the Post-it note, and then you can say, I'll say, I think there should be an app. And then once I click off, that sticky note will stay there and you'll be able to move it around. If I have another comment that I want to make, I can go ahead and grab one of these sticky notes from up top and drag it to where I want on the page. And so this could be and again, you can kind of place it wherever you need to. And you'll also see like if ideas are connected, that you're able to basically like draw a line from one to another. And you can continually kind of move them around. So as ideas evolve, or there's ways in which maybe they should be placed next to each other, you can continually move it to the spaces that is most appropriate. And then I think the intention, let me know, Autumn, is we have these different colors, the same way that we would have with Post-it notes. And if your kind of comment is like in support of something, you can use a green one. The yellow ones would be for just like a general comment. So not necessarily supportive or in disagreement with it, but just a general comment could be in the yellow. The orange would be if you have a different viewpoint than maybe what's already been put. And I believe the blue is for questions. Is that right? So
yeah, I think that's a good starting place and we can always adjust. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah. And so feel free to, if you don't remember that convention, you can use them, but just a way to kind of use color as a visual aid for how ideas will get represented here on the Miro board.
Autumn, would
Anything
you be able
else
to add a
that might
little
be helpful?
label above the colors, just as a reminder to what the colors mean?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
I've already forgotten, so I think that would be helpful.
I
Thank
can
you.
help you out.
And Andy, you just also accidentally demonstrated something that I do all the time in Miro, which is I'm trying to grab one thing and I grab something else. What should I do if I accidentally move something completely to a different place on the board? What do you recommend?
Yeah, you can just like use Control Z. So if you like grab this by accident and slide it over, if you just do Control Z on your keyboard, that will undo the action that you just did. I can try to lock things in place, but yeah, maybe
I wouldn't
for
worry
the
about that
next
at this
meeting, we
moment.
can,
Yeah.
try and set that up to prevent that accidental moving of things.
I think it's safe to say that the Miro board, you know, we had the idea on Friday, and it does take a little bit of time to get these things set up. So thank you for being with us on the journey. It will be more populated by the time we meet next week, but we still thought it was good to use it this week to start getting used to it and to be able to take advantage of what it offers today. So I want to acknowledge Alex has joined us. Alex, I know you from outside of these meetings. Have you joined one of these meetings before? Can you remind me, or do you need to introduce yourself to this group?
Yeah, aloha. Yeah, my name is Alex. I've been here before, and in the loop.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I didn't leave you out.
Thank you.
Marcia, I see you've raised your hand.
Just a quick question. You'll kind of guide us when it's
Yes.
appropriate time to use these sticky notes with the Miro board, or
Yeah.
as we're talking, or
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually, I think, go over to the incentives area before we jump into technology. I got a little bit ahead of myself there. And we will, as a group, you know, look at it together and add comments, sort of like we were doing in the Jamboard. But it does allow for, if you want to go ahead and start putting your own comments in here while we're talking, you're welcome to do that, but we'll still work through it as a group. So it just gives you a little bit more ability to jump in and participate with your directly, but I think we'll still talk through everything as a group. And if you put a CQ comment up, we would love to still have you speak to it. So even if you want to write it yourself, or you can have us acknowledge it, but we just want to make sure that everything gets acknowledged as it goes onto the board. Ellen, did you have something?
Yes. Does Miro identify the sticky notes with each of us? Is there a little initial or something that?
I don't know. Andy, do you know the answer to that question?
Yeah, so I'm seeing folks in here, which is great. And so when you do grab a sticky note, I'll do another just example here. So if I pull one down, then there's this little button that looks like a person with like a little pen. It says show author. And so when I click that button on, basically my sticky note will have my name against it. So if you are in here and you're adding notes, it'd be wonderful for you to click this show author button, and then your name will be on all the notes that you create.
That's great. Thank you.
Welcome.
That's great. I'm glad you're here, Andy, because I still don't know how to use Miro very well. So if, anyone who like me is still a newbie, don't be shy about asking questions, because Andy will probably know the answer.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and
Okay.
one other thing that just came to mind, Ellie, just folks
go
are
ahead.
seeing me kind of move around, but if it is your first time in Miro, just kind of how I'm zooming in and zooming out and moving side to side. I'm using the wheel on my mouse to zoom in and like get closer to each of the post notes, see them larger. I'm using the wheel to zoom out, and then I'm using left click to select things and then click and drag to move it around. And then if I want to pane over, so kind of like move over on the board, I'm doing a right click, and then I kind of am able to hold it and move to the place that I want to move on the board. So those are just kind of the basics of trying to navigate around to different spaces on the board. And yes, please ask any questions.
Well, I don't have my mouse right now, so I'm just going to use my pad, as best I can, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And so that's
Yeah.
actually part of the reason Andy is here, is so that if you're not able to jump into the board yourself, he will be your scribe and he'll show us around as we want to look at other things. So I do find it's a lot easier to use with a mouse than it is with like a trackpad. I've never used it on an iPad before, or a tablet, so I don't know how that works, but I'm sure it works somewhat at least. But yeah, this is part of why Andy's here, is he's our sort of tech support and our navigator and our scribe when it comes to capturing everything. So, all right, I think we're set up to dig in. And I would love to revisit the discussions we had last week about return incentives for both the checkout part of the process and the return part of the process. So what we talked about last week, just to do a very quick recap, we discussed the non-return fee model where you don't pay anything to check it out. So it's always, this is like, we could also call it the library book model. And I think that's always a good way to think about it, is like, it's a library book, so you borrow it and you don't pay anything. But if you don't bring the library book back, you do have to pay for the book at the library. So it's kind of, that's the idea on the non-return fee. The deposit model is where you pay a deposit up front and then you get the deposit back when you check it back in. And then we talked a little bit about some sort of hybrid style options. And what we ended up exploring was this idea of, if you have a prepaid option, like a token or some other tokenization type option, then it's kind of like a hybrid model, because it's, the prepaid option is like a deposit, even though it's integrated into the penalty style model or the non-return fee library book model. So Andy, I don't think we kind of got to a specific alignment, though I think there was general alignment around that kind of hybrid model of having the option to borrow for free, but also having the option to use a prepaid token if that worked better for you. And I know this was something that people were going to talk to family members, talk to, friends about, and just get a sense. And we even put a specific question in the survey around what people's preferences are around this. So let me open it up for, if you have reflected on this and have new thoughts you'd want to share, or if you talked with folks and want to share their thoughts. I'm just really interested to hear what some of the conversations about this have happened, what you guys talked about, and what has come back to this forum.
Well, I have some thoughts. I didn't talk to anyone, but
you didn't talk to me, you just have more thoughts. Okay, let's hear your additional thoughts, Jennifer.
Well, just I reread it all and then I digested our conversation from last week, and what I think could put, and I didn't talk to anyone new, but it is based on the conversations we've had in the past, primarily at the Ho'opili'aina, the August 12th event that we did, because we had a lot of useful discussion at that particular event. And there was a lot of really a desire for a deposit, but like a small deposit. So my thought and suggestion is to have a deposit that is a small amount. I think that would work well for low income peoples, that are used to, are perhaps incentivized by those small deposits that exist for high five containers. And so everybody pays a small deposit. You get that back when you return the container, but there still could be an option if needed later for a late fee charge. So it's not, maybe that would be confusing and you have to communicate. And I guess that's the part of the issue with like the library model, if you want to call it that, is just like, how do you communicate, especially when people are just tapping to check something out. So that was my thought, like still have a okay, if you don't return this after the time interval, which we decide upon, then you still get charged until it's returned. That was my thought of a way to kind of address that. And then I really liked TC's suggestion last week in terms of the time return interval to be based on zip code. So I think for residents of Hilo, 1 week. And then if you live outside of Hilo, additional time to return the container, depending on where you are. I mean, I think that we still have to decide where we're putting containers. If we end up having return bins in Volcano and down in Ke'au and Hamakua, then that would not be necessary. But if it doesn't work out from a logistical standpoint to have return bins in far off places starting out, then perhaps just allowing for people different time intervals based on their zip code. And then the other idea I think would be useful is to have like a 48-hour incentive for people to return very quickly. So if you return within 48 hours, you know, you get some points in this loyalty program or whatever the incentive may be. So those are my thoughts.
Can you say more about how much of a small deposit you think, like what is the largest the small deposit could be and still be a small deposit?
I think like 15 cents. I think that's enough of an incentive, but not like you're not going to necessarily feel that increase in price too much. I guess if it's for a large family, then maybe. But yeah, that was my thought, like 15 cents. Same as like the redemption value. Because I guess I still have questions because I always thought we would be tracking to an individual because I don't understand how we can send notifications and reminders and do those types of things if we're not tracking to an individual level. Even if a person has, you know, a card that's what they use, we're still tracking to an individual to some extent. But if we cannot do that, I don't know. I don't have clarity around the tracking technology piece.
I think we are tracking to an individual. We're just not, we're not tracking where that individual goes. I think maybe that was the distinction, that like we will know the tracking. This is a choice that can be made, but my understanding is typically the way these systems work now, the asset, whether it's a cup or container, is yet sort of attached to the profile of a user, and the amount of information you have about that user is a choice that you can make. So in the situation where you're using the let's say you're having a tap your credit card model to check out, then the attachment will be from that credit card to that asset. And so you'll know very minimal information about the user. And if I use 2 different credit cards on 2 different days, you may or may not know that those are both me, for example. But we'll know that an individual has the item. If you have a system where it's like an app, then you'll have additional information that I might have shared as a user. I might give you my email or my phone number or things like that. I'm actually not sure right now, and this is something I can find out and come back with if, and maybe Andy or Autumn knows, but if like the credit card checkout model includes access to a phone number, for example, where you could actually text someone based on them having checked out their cup with a credit card.
I think like tracking too, because I mean, that's what so many stores do, right? If you're part of their loyalty or just to get the discount, you know, at Safeway, for example, or there's Maikai points program for Foodland, like they all track to a phone number, which I think that would work for a lot of people, maybe not all. I mean, I definitely have friends who have a lot of instability in their life and are constantly changing phone numbers and have a hard time like keeping a phone. So like it's definitely not going to work for everyone, but I think it's going to work for a lot of people.
Hey, Andy,
just to afford.
Before you we have this is on the next panel over, so I think you don't need to recreate all that right now. We've got it. Other way. Left. There you go. Tap to reuse. Sign up to reuse. Yeah, that's there. We're going to get there next, and maybe I think we've sort of gone back and forth between these topics a little bit. Marcia, I do see your hand is raised. I wanted to just ask you one more question, Jennifer, before we move on to Marcia. One of the things we talked about last week is that if the amount that is sort of on the line when someone borrows something, if it's less than the amount that it costs to replace the asset, if that person doesn't bring it back, then the system not only loses items, you know, when people don't bring things back, but it also loses money. And that makes it hard for it to be self-sustaining economically over time. 15 cents is not enough to cover the value of an item of any, that I'm not aware of any reusable cups that can be purchased for 15 cents per cup, for example. So how do you navigate that trade-off in your mind, Jennifer? How do you balance the sort of wanting to keep that deposit value really low, but also knowing that
I guess like I wasn't clear. I think we should have a deposit but that doesn't mean you don't have to pay a late fee if you don't return the container. So it's essentially both, right? Like there's like that incentive of getting 15 cents back and paying a small deposit to return it. But then if you don't bring it back after a period of time, then you pay a late fee. It's like you don't own it with the deposit.
One of the differences between which can be true between deposit models and the like library book model is that if deposits are paid in cash, you have no idea, like, you're not tracking to the person necessarily. You know that an item has been checked out, but you don't know who has it because it was a cash deposit. So I think I just want to clarify with you, the 15 cents, for example, that you're describing here would still have to have a credit card backup, because otherwise if someone doesn't return something, you have no way of charging them more money for not returning it. I'm just trying to understand. So in what you're proposing is in the tap to reuse model, when you check something out, you're paying 15 cents for it at the checkout. And then when you bring it back, you get your 15 cents back. But if you don't bring it back, we've still saved the credit card number from the checkout, or we still have the prepaid token that's backing it up. And so then when that if that doesn't get returned in time, then you still have the ability to charge an additional like library book fee. Am I understanding what you're saying?
That's my thought. I think it opens up some opportunities just for like theft, which makes me hesitant. But I think we have to track, right? I guess like what I don't understand about the Galveston model is you don't have all tech-enabled bins. So I guess I don't understand how we know something has been turned in by that particular person that checked it out. Unless it's done at the washing phase at the facility. That's what happens. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm going to let Dagny speak to that. And I know, Marcia, I don't want to lose your comment. So sorry, I know we were resolving this, but we'll come back to you. But Dagny, did you want to speak to what Jennifer was just saying? And then we'll come back to Marcia.
I'll just make two quick comments. Yes, they can either be scanned during the logistics process and at the washing facility, or just at the washing facility. So there's different ways to do that, but they do get scanned back in to the return. And then one comment on the 15-cent deposit value. One thing in using sort of the tap to reuse model, I think it might be helpful to keep in mind for folks is that small charges tend to be very difficult because every time you have a charge with the credit card company, they are charging you a fee. And so if you have something that's about 15 cents of a deposit, you're probably paying 5 to 10 cents just to have that transaction take place. So it's a little bit tricky to have small deposits in that model. So those are my two quick interjections.
Thanks, Dagny. Jennifer, do you have anything else? Do you want to reflect, and we'll go to Marcia and come back to you for additional comments?
No, those are just my thoughts. I mean, I'm not like married to them and think that it's absolutely the way to do it. I'm just trying to think of how we can accommodate different segments of the population and utilize already existing systems of like deposits and being effective for lower income, or like unhoused people living downtown, and still, so that it was just a thought. If it like doesn't work, then my feelings aren't hurt by any means. It's just an idea, and maybe it's not a great one. So we can move on to Marcia.
I think all the thinking is important, by the way, because it's really helpful to do these exercises and think through all of that, because it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. So I think we just have to put all the pros and cons on the table to get to that decision. We're just hoping to fill in the gaps of information.
Okay, Marcia, you're up, and then Nona is in the chat next.
Yeah, thank you. I'm hear you, Jennifer. I'm with you on that. Dagny's piece was very helpful. I think mainly for me and the people I speak to understand the ramifications of this program or how the system works. So in a nutshell, I did survey. I had that question put together. I'm not going to do anything fancy here technologically, just to let you know, I sent on a mass email, and that's why Nona's here, because she was one who responded. Basically, I said, for this proposed reuse foodware system in Hilo, would you, how much are you willing to, if the item is not returned, the foodware piece, how much are you willing to forfeit or pay for it? The majority of people, they had not a problem with having to pay anywhere from $1 to $5 or possibly more for the for the item if it was not returned. Most of these people who responded do not live in Hilo. So their other piece of their answer was, yeah, I don't have a problem with paying fee, but could you extend the return time? They ranged from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. If a collection bin or bins are placed in Volcano or somewhere much closer than Hilo, then I think they would be, more likely to return it more promptly. I know I would. So having the collection bins placed strategically would be helpful. That's the main part that I want to do. And this discussion is good because I do want to hear about how that tracking does work. So that's it. I'm gonna shut up now and let somebody else talk.
Marcia, thank you for doing that homework and for reaching out to everyone. And it's really helpful to hear that people were comfortable with the idea that if they didn't return something, that the amount that they would do forfeiting would be $1 to $5 or even more than that. Andy, I might make a note. It wouldn't be the late fee. It would be the non-return fee. Just the distinction there. And I think she even said 5+, and we can put a plus in there after the 5. Great.
I just want to piggyback on what Marcia shared. I guess the reason why I have this idea for the 15-cent deposit is because I don't know how we're going to get that money from people that don't have any money. If they don't have a credit card and they literally don't have money for a late fee. That's why I feel like there needs to be some upfront incentive for populations that, because and the reason why this is in my mind is this is from conversations we had. And, one of the guys that was there just I know so many people that they just keep the container and they wouldn't pay the late, they wouldn't pay the late fee and they will just keep the container. And I think that's the reality of what is going to happen with a lot of people. And how do we get the money from people? If they don't want to pay it, they don't have a credit card. What are we going to do? Steal their EBT? That's not okay either. So
no, of course,
that's why I feel like there needs to be some kind of baked in and small incentive for return.
So I think I can speak to that. I also want to acknowledge Nona's comment in the chat. Is there already a model for those without a way to pay, for example, the unhoused? I think that what might be helpful at this point is to just do a little zoom out and look over at the checkout technologies. And actually, Dagny, since you're here and I'm the facilitator today, which means that you're the expert. So I don't get to be the expert today. I just have to facilitate. I just get to facilitate since I'm being Kool-Aid. I'm a much less wonderful version of Kool-Aid today. So if you would just mind giving a little overview of this, and I think speak to both Nona's question and Jennifer's question. And I think on the tap to reuse addressing tokenization would be helpful. And then Vanessa, I see your comment and we'll speak to that next.
That sounds good. And depending on how far back the comments go, I can only see a couple of them. So let me know if I don't hit on something and I'll add to it. We're seeing a couple of different ways that tracking technology is working to help accommodate knowing where these assets are for many reasons, not just so that we know how to get them back, but also so that we understand how many are out, where they need to go, where they need to be picked up. They help to build operational efficiencies into the system. So the first way is that you would sign up to use, and this is often an option that's available either on a native app you would download from your phone or on a web-based app. So perhaps you would scan a QR code and that could take you to a website where then you could sign up. Usually the details required would include your name, an email, phone number, and usually a credit card. On the tap to reuse, so I'll do the high level description and then we can go into some of the details and then also talk about sort of equity accessibility issues. On the tap to reuse model, it is designed such that there's no advanced sign up required and that you would simply tap your credit card on a piece of hardware at the same time that you're making payment. And through the use of your credit card, the item would automatically be associated to you. And then you could walk away without having to do anything else. Of course, there's information up front. You're agreeing to check out this item and return this item. You can also then usually in this tap to reuse also offers apps so that if you are interested in downloading an app or going onto a website to understand your use or how long you've had something out or where the drop-off locations are, etc., that is also a feature that is included in this. But it allows for a much more seamless onboarding of people where they don't have to sort of go through this sign-up process. So these are the two most common checkout methodologies right now for assets that are being tracked, which are the majority in the foodware space. For the equity and accessibility piece, I think that there's a lot of different ways to think about approaching it. Jennifer mentioned, like, we don't want to take their EBIT, their EBT money. Of course not. Obviously, we don't want to put people who are in a difficult position, already in a difficult position. But I think there are ways to come in where we're able to tokenize, either tokenize where folks who don't have a credit card can access a token that allows them the first use. And as long as they're returned into the system, they can get another one. Or whereby we can pre-authorize a checkout through an EBIT or other kind of state benefits card. Oftentimes these cards are using similar NFC types of technology and other technologies, university cards, etc. So I think that, you know, one of our jobs as a group will be to think about some of the methodologies that could help to accommodate the front-loading accessibility for people in the community who we know it will be a challenge for from the very beginning. So that's the high level. Let me know if I missed questions in the chat.
Dagny, I think if you're willing, Andy, could we zoom over to the other incentives? I think that it might just get everything on kind of on the table because all three of these ideas go together. We have the technology piece, we have the checkout incentives, and then we have the return incentives. So I think let's kind of talk through what each of these are. Dagny, if you're willing to guide us through.
Yeah, of course.
Then I think that, but then we can go back to some of the questions in the chat, but at least then we will have kind of covered what all the ideas are at least.
Sure. So from the return incentive, obviously we need people to return, right? So the time frame is one thing, and I was writing in the chat, you know, there's a lot of different ways to think about the time frame. One, what's convenient for people. In systems that I have worked in, the majority of returns happen within the first 72 hours. Actually, that's wrong. The majority of returns happen within the first 24 hours, and the next set of returns generally within 72 hours. That said, systems out there do anything, I would say, from 1 week to 2 weeks, typically. I think some systems allow a longer. Pros and cons of that mean the longer that you have assets available to be out, the more assets you have to have in storage in order to cover those outage times. So there's a trade-off there in terms of how much inventory you're just sitting on and have to buy upfront to cover longer checkout times. I think that what I'm writing in the chat, I think there's creative ways to solve for that with communities have a broader geographic landscape they're working with, which could be a renewal period, much like you would see in a library, so that you still capture the majority of your assets early on, but those people who need a longer period of time can opt in for a longer period of time. Fees are also a consideration that we could have to try and encourage that quick return time. This one has a similar balance as the 15-cent upfront deposit would, in that you would have to have enough of a late fee to make it worth to pay the credit card fee you're going to be charged as an organization for making a charge, right? So if you have a 10-cent late fee, it's going to be a wash for you as an organization because that's going to be spent paying the credit card company. But I think that there are circumstances this can be effective. Redemption value is something that we've discussed a lot. Regarding, we want to be able to capture those assets that are maybe inadvertently lost from the system. So there's a big event, maybe there's a lot of people that are drinking, people maybe forget things more than they might otherwise, and there are reusable cups that are left behind. How can we make sure that those aren't just lost to the environment generally, but get captured and brought back into the system? And one way to do that is to create a redemption value on these items. So people are incentivized to bring these items back in. What happens when these items are brought back in is that the person who returns it gets the value of that redemption, so approximately 15 cents. The person who had it checked out is charged that 15 cents for getting that item plus a small processing fee, but they don't have to pay a lost fee. So for them, if you've lost your item or forgotten it, it's still a benefit to have somebody else return it because you don't pay the lost fee. And then there's all kinds of other ideas that we can begin to explore around gamification, incentives. You know, maybe the person who checks out the most assets in any given month gets a free lunch, or, you know, there's a million ways to get creative around gamification within the system. So I will pause there, and I think that gives us a little bit of an overview, and happy to have questions then.
Very helpful to hear all of that. Thank you.
Great. And so Nona, I know you'd asked a question in the chat. Is there a model for people who don't have the ability to pay, for example, like maybe they don't have a credit card, how might they pay? I think Dagny addressed that. Do you have any other questions about how that could work?
Well, you know, I'm a medical person, and educationally, you know, we look at everything from a third grade level. And so for me, relative to anything that concerns a community and economics, I look at it from the standpoint of the, I hate to use the word lowest denominator, but I am, for lack of a better term, for me this morning. But I like to look at everything from that perspective. If I was a person living on the street who I know frequent, when they do have any kind of money, they do frequent the fast food establishments. And there are a lot of them in in the town of Hilo. And so I look at everything from that perspective. And so, not that I'm an expert, but I think, okay, how difficult will it be for them to use anything? And I'm not an expert on this stuff, so I guess I'm asking for more information. But I just wondered, in your expertise and your experience, is there already a model out there who does this sort of thing, who handles people that live on the street, who may or may not have an EBT card, who may or may not have access to the bins, they don't have transportation. We have a lot of people between Hilo and Volcano. It's quite a distance. And so I look at all of the numerous issues that brings up. And what I hate to say that it makes me look at it as more, it creates more what if kind of issues than the positive. And so I just wondered if there was already a model out there that would make me feel a little more confident about this program.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat the scenario and say, like, this is a give me. I think that you bring up really good questions and excellent complexities. And these are all things that I think every community grapples with in a slightly different way. I think Europe has done a really, Europe tends to have programs or systems more readily available for some of their lesser advantaged populations. And so I think seeing accessible models that have come out in Germany and the Netherlands, where there's some universal accessibility. I think in the context of Hilo, I think the geographic challenges are real. And I think the landscape of Hilo, as we think of that, I think that our ability to have coverage for the return infrastructure is going to be very good. I think that we will not face challenges of people being able to find someplace that they can return in Hilo proper. So beyond downtown, but I think when we think of the main geographic density of Hilo, we're going to be able to have enough return locations that shouldn't be one of the problems that we're dealing with. I think we should think around more broadly, can we accommodate Volcano? But I think one of the things, now that's my negative side. I think on the positive side, we do have things like the Hiloani, the bus, right? I think that there's an easy way for us to tap people in. The bus system is really, as far as I can tell, because it's free, used by almost all of those populations, and could be one way we might have a methodology to offer returns for people along that route. For instance, if we can have a return partnership with the bus, where people can drop it at the bus location, it goes on the bus and it's coming back to Hilo, then that's one way to accommodate. And I do think that we will be able to overcome. We've done lots and lots of interviews with this population. We had quite a wonderful participation for sort of the disadvantaged population Hilo itself. And I think we've seen good engagement by this community, and I think they're actually going to value being able to use these things, because I think they'll probably use them in their everyday life and then return them when they happen to be back at a place where they can get another one that's clean.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That makes me feel a little bit better that there's already some examples out there that we might be able to borrow from. Like I said, I kind of use that as the barometer, that population as the barometer. And yeah, we do have our challenges on Hawaii Island because of the distance between towns and between resources. So that's a huge barrier in a lot of cases, and especially for access to services. So anyway, that's why I'm thinking of that. So thank you for sharing that. It at least tells me that there's already some examples out there that we might be able to come from. I think the idea of using the bus, although our bus service is sporadic here, but it is an option. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Nana. That might be a good segue to Vanessa's comment in the chat about the placement of collection bins. So I know that we haven't talked a lot about the collection bin placement, or what that's going to look like. Her question is, would it be possible to begin with a few key point locations, then expand the collection location network as the program grows? One data point that I can share, and then Dagny, I'm going to invite you to speak a little bit to Vanessa's question, is one of the sources of funding that is supporting this project, the SWIFR grant, as we call it, Solid Waste Infrastructure for Recycling and Reuse. That grant is providing funds to support the purchase and installation of collection bins, and the amount that has been budgeted in that grant so far, none of this, of course, is like set in stone, but what was asked for and what has been funded is 325 collection bins. So just to give you a sense of how many bins we anticipate being able to install even before the program launches, to be able to make returning things as convenient as possible. So Dagny, do you want to address a little bit more about sort of how we think about placing collection bins and the value of having, starting with a few and sort of, dipping a toe in the water versus, providing some, that broader network from the very beginning? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the, I've dipped in and out, so I haven't been privy to all of your conversations. So I'm so grateful to be here when I'm able. And I'm sure you've discussed this, but one of the reasons that we believe the scaled approach is necessary is because it unlocks accessibility and ease of use that become a real barrier to participation. Just like you've really highlighted in the sort of volcano situation, what are people going to do if they're all the way out there and there isn't a return bin? So what we do is partner with both the University of Chicago and at the University of Michigan. In Chicago, we have the Data Sciences Institute, and in Michigan, a life cycle assessment partnership, where we take a look at the community in a very data-driven way, geographic way, density way, the flows of people and traffic and cars. And we layer that along with all the feedback that we'll get during these sessions, but also the feedback that came in during the community engagement in the week that we were there, and the many workshops, to understand where are the locations in the community that people are going, that it makes the most sense to put this return infrastructure. Ideally, and the recommendation would be for there to be return infrastructure, obviously, in every business that has reusable items, so you can drop it off in any business. But then to have a very well carpeted, I'll say, external outside public infrastructure available as well. I think the reason we believe that single use is so easy is because we have an awful lot of infrastructure that supports its use. And that reuse becoming as easy as disposables requires a mimic of that normalized behavior, that normalized ease, and being able to get something and then drop it off when you've finished eating it or drinking it. So we would look at doing, to give you some context, in Galveston, we will look at starting with 100 external return bins. That's in addition to what is in the actual businesses that are offering reusables. And Galveston geographically is quite a bit smaller than Hilo. So that can just give us some starting context. I think Jennifer had I think it was Jennifer, a great question in there, like how do we handle sort of the redemption fee if things go into the return bin? So I'll go down that path, but let me pause on talking about sort of the return infrastructure first, and then see if it's appropriate to start down answering some of these specific questions.
Andy, you're doing a great job keeping up on the board. I hope no one is getting seasick. It's a lot of zooming around. So, sorry. Other comments or questions for Dagny?
Yeah, I was going to ask if you passed out Anavert or Dramamine.
Yeah, we should. We need to send over
next time
before the next call. That's a great suggestion. Yeah, this is one of the learnings from using Miro for the first time today. Well, great. I wanted keep an eye on the time. I know that we sometimes we say that the meetings take an hour and 15 minutes, but we also allow time for the meetings to continue as long as people are interested in staying and having conversation. So what I'd like to do, just maybe as like a pulse check on where we are right now, and if you want to sort of zoom back up to where we were before on the so the return incentives, the late fee, all of that, and then we have technology. So these are kind of the three topics that we are looking at today. Let's stay in return incentives for checkout. So I know I just said the opposite of that, but if we zoom back in here, I want to test sort of where this group, at least at this moment, is on this. So we've talked a lot about different options here. It sounds like what we're trying to optimize for is we want to make sure that it's accessible, right? That's sort of one of the fundamental premises of this program, is that it can be accessible to anyone who wants to participate in it. It's probably worth saying that, at least for right now, we hope that businesses will offer reuse, and we want to support them in doing that, but they're also welcome to continue offering single use. So it's not that if you can't participate in the reuse system, you can't buy a drink. At least that could change, I suppose. I don't know what the legislative future holds, but at the moment, at least, reuse will be an option, and we want it to be an option that everyone is excited to and is easy to say yes to. But it won't be the only option. I guess I want to make sure everyone's still clear on that. It still will be a choice. So if people want to check out a reusable cup, let's just say for today, the way that minimizes the upfront cost to the individual is to use the library book model, the non-return fee model, where people don't pay anything to borrow the cup, and as long as they return it back, it remains free. If you are someone who doesn't have a credit card or who isn't able to participate in that way with a credit card, you would have an alternative card that you could use to check out an item that would effectively cover if you don't return it, then there's some value associated with that card that would cover the cost of the item, being removed from the system. But probably it wouldn't be that individual paying that cost. Most likely it would come from a different source of funding, because that person would have been provided with that card in some context, because they are entitled to it as a way of accessing the system. We heard from Marcia that a library book model where you pay maybe $5 or even a little bit more money to sort of, if you don't borrow an item in order to have a nice item to use, is acceptable to the people that she blasted out the email to. I haven't heard any other comments on that, so I don't know if there's dissenting opinions there, but hearing the discussion, it feels to me like this model of library book model plus token model feels workable. And Jennifer, I know you were really thinking about how do we cover the value and also how do we have an upfront cost, but I think this solves for what you were looking for. If we propose to do it this way, given the checkout options of sort of the tap to reuse credit card system, where there is that kind of guarantee on the value of an item if something doesn't come back, or the token also provides that guarantee. So we don't lose the value. So if we were to just test for, we'll say a test for alignment, if the proposal were adopt the library book model with a token model, there's anyone who feels like that would be not viable, that you would sort of have a principled and paramount objection to taking that path forward? can
May I
indicate your,
just ask a question on
of
the
course.
library model? One of the features you mentioned that I thought was also very attractive was the renewal. That's what speak to places like Volcano if one of us didn't, couldn't get to the bin sooner. So I like that, if that's an option, we can build into that as well for our system, where you can extend if you just need a little bit more time to get that item returned to a collection bin. Did I make myself
I think
clear?
that's reason. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And I think it's much like the library, like you can renew 3 times, but you can't renew for a year.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I'm fine with testing that out. I guess I have my misgivings of if it's going to work as well as we hope. I do think we need a carrot, an incentive carrot to encourage people to return within a certain time period or just in general, because if we're not going to have like some kind of deposit or you get 15 cents when you bring your container back for people that maybe we may not be able to track well, and we may not be able to get the late fee from because they don't have any money, that I think there needs to be a carrot for those people. And so if it's not getting a little deposit, maybe it's I don't know what it could be, but I think we need a carrot to get it back.
Well, let's
Maybe a quick clarifier, Ellie.
Please go ahead.
I think that if we have a tokenization method, then those people who don't have the money, I think you're right. I mean, they risk not being able to use the system in the future if they don't return the item, but we've already preloaded sort of the money, whether we do that through grant funding or whatever funding, how we can do that in the system. And then for the other people, the credit card's already on file. So that charge goes through with or without their approval if it doesn't get returned. I mean, they've already pre-consented to that charge. So I think that we don't risk at least losing the value of that asset. Now, incentivizing to return earlier, I think that can be up for discussion. And we can get creative about methodologies for doing that.
Ellen, I see you've raised your hand. I want to just say, I think that is sort of the next section that we would get to. So Andy, if you want to just zoom over to the right for a second, we have these 4 different pieces of incentives on the return side. So we have the return time frame, which I know we've talked about quite a bit, but then there's also the option of having a late fee. From I would say, the research and the observations that Perpetual has done on how systems work in other places. I think that, well, Dagny, I should let you speak to this, but I don't know that we recommend a late fee. I think that not losing money on losing items is important, but if you can find other behavioral nudges like positive incentives to return things, then I think that's more effective than a late fee. So I think that's something that can happen, but I'm not sure that the Perpetual perspective would be to advocate for a late fee. I think we would say nudge people, give people incentives, but don't try to get more money from people if they just return something late. I don't think that's really the spirit of the program. We've talked about the redemption value, which is another way to get things back. And then this sort of non-financial and other incentives. Kule has a wonderful idea for including like Hawaiian education videos and other things that could be incentives for people to return things early or return things in general. So I do agree, Dagny, that like getting really creative on these incentives to get people to return things quickly and just to remember to return them at all is really important. But I think again, these all are part of the same thing. So maybe it's just we need to phrase the overall package as one proposal as opposed to distinct proposals. All right, let me pause here. Yes, Nona, I completely agree. Positive incentives work better than negative incentives. Ellen, let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, just some background for those who weren't able to attend the some of the community meetings that we had. for locations of bins, and this might go for outside of Hilo, people were asked like popular places that they went to daily, weekly, and the post office is one, the library is another, and if there is a school in the area. So when we're looking at return bin locations outside of Hilo, those would be considered convenient, to maybe many of the population of, say, Volcano or Kea'au. So just a little background.
Thank you, Ellen. So I'd like to test something with this group because I don't want to keep people here too long. I'm so grateful for the time that people are dedicating to this process. I think that, and Andy, maybe I'll have you kind of do a bit of a zoom out. What could be a viable, I'd love to test sort of, is there agreement with this proposal? So the proposal would be to use the library book model where we are, and library book model can work either with either of the checkout systems. It can work with the tap to reuse, or it can work with an app. So with this, I'm not going to try to connect this to that. But if we think about the library book model, where if you don't return the item within a certain amount of time, you do pay a non-return fee, but you have the option to renew up to maybe 2 times, so that if you're stuck for some reason, you're out of town, you can't get it back, you have the option to extend the time, not indefinitely, but for a little while. We say that there's no late fee. We'll just provide positive incentives to have people return things in advance. And we will go with the redemption value so that if items do get lost, there's the opportunity for people to return them, get a little bit of money for it, get 15 cents for it. It helps the person who lost it. It helps ensure there's no litter. And it provides a little bit of income to people who are motivated to collect things that get lost or littered. So that's sort of connecting all of these things together. So non-return with tokens, no late fee, lots of good incentives, redemption value, and I'm not proposing a specific return time at this point because I think we need to wait and see the map for the return time. So holding on how many days or weeks people get to return. Are there any concerns, objections, feelings about if that proposal would be viable? And now we are in outer space.
I'll make a little additional note there.
Yes.
The tap and
My only-
return.
I think, Dag, did you want to modify the proposal? Yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, because Craig is here. He brings a lot of experience with the High Five program, and I've heard him tell stories around a lot of vandalism and theft. And so that's my concern with the redemption value. If we have return bins that are not tech enabled to say that this container was already checked in and you can't get a redemption value on it. And so since Craig is here, I'd like to hear his thoughts on what potential problems we might have with theft based on his past experience. And I know he doesn't like to talk, but hopefully he's willing to share.
Well, maybe while he's thinking about
I can kind of chime in on that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I mean, just kind of commenting on Jen's point there. You guys on Hawaii kind of might have noticed the dramatic reduction in high five bins in public parks and stuff. There used to be lots, and we dealt with vandalism, and that's why there's very few public high five bins. So I think this just kind of circles back to Ellie's comment earlier about they just need to be secured. So I can't really comment on tech enabled or not, but I think we're probably on the same page there. Just whatever sits, just like the libraries, you can't reach in. So I hope that helps.
That
But
helps a lot, Alex.
Did people destroy them? Like, I mean, I've heard stories of from Lay, who does the trash cleanups downtown, that people literally take the garbage cans that are bolted down and throw them in river. So I mean, like, what are
This-
we what level of vandalism might we
Yeah,
have to
so I mean, it
deal
really
with?
runs the gamut. You know, some bins were lit on fire, some bins were taken, ones that weren't securely bolted down, people like take them home to use as their own personal recycle bins or whatever. And we even had competition
Yeah.
or like kind of competition from people who are doing their own high five collection, kind of community level stuff where yeah, they didn't like it.
I think this is a really, valid point. I two comments I'll make quickly, given the time. One, public infrastructure has to expect vandalism. Most of these units are tested to expect baseball bats, all of the things that might unfortunately have to expect in a public space scenario. They definitely go through a bolting process that would be in conjunction with any permitting with the city requirements around that. So I think we just have to expect that there's going to be vandalism. They're definitely designed to be one way in which it would be very difficult to vandalize, to take items out. Jennifer brings up a great point. I mean, you are in a better position when you have a tech-enabled bin, but it's not always viable financially or otherwise to have that everywhere. And those additional units just have to be really secured well. So I think that is in the landscape of knowledge for the folks out there that are designing these, and they have been using them in public spaces and big cities and places where you get vandalism. The other, it wasn't really necessarily an edit to your summary of the system, Ellie, but more to say that many of the tap to reuse models, while it sort of makes the checkout renewal irrelevant, most of them operate on if you return the item late at any point, you are refunded. So you don't end up paying that full amount. We could consider that maybe a late fee if we want to charge something a little bit if they're very late. So I just think it's important to say, I think we would disincentivize people if they did eventually return something and they still paid the full amount. So just a consideration. Sorry,
Jennifer,
muddy the
no, that's
waters.
good. Having heard what Dagny said about the sort of street hardened nature of collection bins, does that change your feelings about redemption, or do you still feel concerned that they would all get vandalized?
I just wanted to hear from DM because I know they have experience on that in their past experience and their thoughts. But if it looks like we can weather the vandalism, and maybe in areas that we anticipate that might happen, like downtown Hilo at night, we could just have bins only indoors where they're not out, or there's workarounds. I just wanted to raise that.
Thank you.
To talk about it, which we did, and I feel good.
I'd like to acknowledge Shannon for bringing Taylor Swift into the conversation. That's, it's very of the moment for sure. And unfortunately, it's a very resonant lyric sometimes. But I think part of what we're trying to do in this process, and I assume everyone could see the chat, but Shannon said that this is why we can't have nice things is playing in her head as we have this discussion. Well, Jennifer, having aired that concern, and I want to drive us towards an ending, whether it's an alignment or not, I can't say. But if we wanted to test alignment, and once again on what Andy has on the board here, so we've got library book value, we've got redemption model, we've got no late fee, but we have positive incentives for returning things. And we do acknowledge that if something is returned late, you still get refunded for it. I think there's an outer bound on that time-wise. If you return it a year later, you may not get your refund, but certainly within a month or 2 months, something like that, you'd get refunded. Positive incentives, sometimes monetary and sometimes otherwise. And I think it's something that's important to acknowledge as well. We've talked about, I know Kool-Aid was excited about, I think it was pizza points or something like that, that there's different types of reward systems that can link. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I know we're starting to lose people because we're going a bit over time. So Any objections on this sort of proposal that Andy's quickly adding to here before we release everyone? Okay, I'm not hearing any objections, so I'm going to hold that as a tentative alignment. And I think we'll revisit all of this in future conversations, but I think we can at least declare for today, we have tentative alignment on this model. And as always, please continue talking to friends, please continue talking to family. We want to continue bringing more voices into this conversation so that we're really hearing from everybody. And we will continue next week. We'll revisit the checkout model, so the sort of using an app versus just tapping your credit card. And I think that we'll hope to cover that as well as a couple of other topics next week so that we can continue going through all this together. Any last questions, comments, concerns, things? Shannon, I see your comment. And we will definitely, so I think that if we're able to bring collection bins into next week's conversation, like the placement map and some of the considerations around that, that seems like it would be an unlock for some of these other topics where they're quite dependent. So really appreciate that comment. And thank you, Shannon, for noting that. Any other last things before we send everyone back to enjoy the rest of your beautiful days or rainy days, depending on where you are? Well, Andy, if you don't mind dropping the Miro board just for a minute. I know we can't really see everyone's faces, but at least those of us, we can kind of all see. There we go. Hello, Marcia. Hey, Alex. Thank you. Thank you. We had a smaller group today, and I'm excited to keep going on this process. Thank you for being here. We'll talk to everyone soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.